Hello, my name is Humberto Moro, and I'm Deputy Director here at Dia Art Foundation, and I'm curator of David Lamelas The Machine. And I want to welcome you to Dia Chelsea for a conversation with Sabine and without David Lamelas. And we'll get to that point. David has had a very intense time with the opening of the exhibition and had to go back to Buenos Aires. But in turn, we're gonna have some giveaways for you. So we have this incredible out of print catalog from the CAIC, the Center for Art and Communication, that was brought by our friends from Isla. They have been holding on to these catalogs for the past 20 years, and they're a rarity. You cannot get this. So by the end of this talk, if you stay with us, you'll get one copy. David, of course, it's desolated he couldn't be here, and he wanted to say a few words. So I am gonna call him so you can hear from him.
Hello.
Hola, David.
Hello.
You are on the mic in our program space, and everyone is listening to you. So maybe you want to say a few words to everyone that is here accompanying for this talk.
All right. Is the film being projected at the same moment or not?
Say again?
The film is on? No.
No, we have a beautiful slideshow with the picture of you in that butterfly chair in Buenos Aires in 1962.
That was a long time ago, yes. Well, I want to say to everybody, I don't know how many people are there, but I want to say thank you so much for the attention, and thank you so much for being with me. And I'm so sorry because of personal reasons I couldn't possibly be with you, but I'm with you in my heart, in my voice as well.
Thank you so much, David. Bye-bye.
No, we can still talk a little bit.
Oh, you want to stay here? Oh, perfect. Awesome. What do you want to say? How do you feel about the show?
Well, the show, I mean, it's not because it's my show, but it's an amazing show. Really, I mean, it's not really my show. It's just something that happens. And I think that's wonderful when that happens, that it's no longer your work, belongs to the work itself. It happens, a life of each piece is a part of each piece is a part of is a segment of the entire discourse. And I feel that every piece is absolutely being perfectly presented. And they are all very, 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 very actual, this very moment. So thank you very much to all of you to have done this with me.
Thank you, David. Thank you for your generosity.
So, we can begin with Sabine or you, or let's move on.
Yeah, you can stay here and you can drop whenever you want, or you can interject. I'll keep you here with me, but I'll start by saying thank you to Kim Golding and Max Tanon, who organize all public programs here at Dia Chelsea, as well as the visitor experience team here. I want to thank Ella Den Elsen, who's curatorial assistant at Dia and my partner in crime in all this adventure with David. Thank you so much, Ella. The exhibitions team. I want to deeply, deeply thank our partner, the Institute for Studies on Latin American Art, ISLA, Ariel, who has been an absolute angel in this project all along, Agustin, Micaela. This is part of a multi-year partnership with Dia, who has brought Delcy Morelos, Echoes from the Borderlands, and this is our third installment with David Lamelas, The Machine. I also want to thank David's Galleries, Jan Mott, who's here with us, and Andreas Gegner from Sprutmagers. Thank you so much for your invaluable support and help through this process. And David, networks are so important to you. You have spoken to many colleagues, curators, other artists throughout your life. And I want to name some of them, some of whom are here. Of course, I want to say hi to your dear friend Anne Goldstein, who is here, who curated with Annie Rorimer Reconsidering the Object of Art in '95, which was such an important show, and you were part of that.
Anne Goldstein is there. Hi, Anne. Hi.
And I also want to mention other important people who we have been in conversation with, like Ines Katzenstein, who curated your show at Museo Tamayo in Malva in 2006, or our very own Jessica Morgan, who in 2008 acquired the Time performance for Tate, and she restaged that with you in London, or Stuart Comer, who's Sabine's predecessor, who curated transmissions in 2015 and installed Office of Information, which we'll touch later. Carla Acevedo Yates, who produced a fiction of a production at the MSU Broad in 2018. Harper Montgomery, who curated Life as Activity in 2021. And all over the MoMA team, who we have been in close collaboration for this show. So as every part of the networks that have been accompanying you throughout life and through your art, I think it's important to acknowledge that today it is a celebration of your art and of everyone that has championed you, an artist that has been so fundamental for the formative years of the 60s and the 70s, for conceptual and minimal practice. And it is precisely because of how important you are that we're here in this moment, and that why your work is still so relevant and still so important for everyone that's here today. What do you think about that, David?
Well, I think that's too much for me almost. All these marvelous people that have been so much part of my life are there at this moment.
Say again?
All these wonderful people that you mentioned, they are there.
Some of them, I'm not going to name everyone, but some of them are here.
Well, that's wonderful. I mean, this is just, I consider this a work in itself that is somehow is the champion process of thinking that all my incredible people that are present for me, I feel it is, it's extraordinary, and I do thank you for the acknowledgement, and that's all I can say. I do thank you to every one of you.
Thank you, David.
Okay, so maybe we should leave you go now.
Okay.
And well, so keep on talking, and if you have any other questions, please call.
We'll call.
But, okay, bye-bye.
Thank you so
Bye.
much. Bye-bye.
Get better, David.
Say hello to Sabine.
Get better.
Hi, Sabine, how are you?
I'm good. I miss you.
Hi, Sabine.
Hi.
We love you, David. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
So before I introduce Sabine and move on to our conversation, I'm going to speak a little bit about the project that encompasses all these parts that we have titled The Machine. And I bumped into this archival note at David's archive that Isla very generously made available to us. And I found this note, which is undated, but is a note from a hotel in Vienna.
Across the Generali Foundation, where I put up David usually, by the way.
Yes. So he was working there, and he made this note that says, "The machine as a process of invention, the brain as a machine. I've always been fascinated about the systems of thought development, from concept to idea, as a means of information, of communication, of transportation, and of control. And I was fascinated because in this very quick note, you could almost encompass everything that is relevant for David, all these multi-parted processes that are thinking about communication, mobility, control, information, and it kind of like became a Rosetta Stone for me to think about how to move in a project that needed to be it needed to exist in different times and in different places. So for that, we divided this project in 3 parts. The first part is a performance series, which in David's very own way already happened. Happened in February 10. We had 14, 16-meter cubes, which he originally developed for the Kunsthalle Basel in 2014. We had the restaging of that work here in our galleries for a single night when the galleries were completely empty, and after we deinstalled our Duane Linklater show and before we started the construction for David's show. And we will have 2 more iterations of the work time that's going to be performed here in Dia Beacon and in Dia Chelsea, as well as a monthly performance of Office of Information that's going to happen here in the gallery, and we'll go through that with Sabine too. The second component is the exhibition that is here in our galleries that encompasses a time from 1965 to especially commissioned work. And the exhibition focuses more specifically in the 60s and the early 70s, and then it jumps to the 90s. It jumps to the 90s because this is a moment in which David returns to sculpture and returns to installation. And what happens mostly in the 70s and the 80s is that he goes into film. And then that takes me to the third part of the project, which is the film program. Because right here in this space, we have a film program that is happening throughout the entirety of the show and has 4 chapters. And in these 4 chapters, we're starting with This Is My Place, which is a biographical film that Isla produced with David and with curator Carla Acevedo that is going to be here for 9 weeks. After that, we move to part 2, which are different iterations of Time as Activity, which is a series that he started in the 70s and continued to do up to the present. The third part is works that he shot on film, several works in a loop. And then the fourth and last part are the films that he did in collaboration with Hildegard de Duane, who is here with us. So thank you so much, Hildegard, for being here, and we'll have you in the fall returning for a program for this part of the film program. You, I think, are the most substantial collaborator of David over the years, and we're really lucky to have you. So thank you for being here. Now, moving on to our guest today, Sabine Breitwieser, I hope I didn't butcher your last name, who's an independent curator and scholar. She was previously the founding director and chief curator of the Generali Foundation. And as Jessica, our director, said, everyone associated Sabine with Generali. You were the face for Generali for so many years. Then you moved on as a chief curator of media and performance at the Museum of Modern Art at MoMA. And then you were the director of the museum, the Modern Museum in Salzburg. You've organized and directed more than 150 exhibitions, including solo exhibitions by Etel Adnan, Harun Farocki, Andrea Fraser, who I think is also here with us. Hi, Andrea. Isa Gensken, Dan Graham, and many, many others. During her tenure at the Museum of Modern Art, she acquired several works of David. For example, analysis of the elements by which massive consumption of information takes place, which not coincidentally just came on view today. And I think that is a rare opportunity to see a very special work, and we'll talk about it later. And she also acquired Office of Information about the Vietnam War at 3 levels: the visual, image, text, and audio. You can tell that David had a lot of fun titling these works. These both from 68, in addition to several works on film. Sabine, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for being so brave with me to refurbish this conversation to account for Earth's current situation. So we'll start with a little bit of David's bio. This is such a special image of him, in his first Holy Communion in the 1950s, as well as the cover of the CAI catalog, which is a picture with his twin brother Victor, who passed as a child. But I think this picture is so important to me because it really shows how regal David was from an early stage in life, and how dignified his attitude towards life has always been. He came from a family of Spanish immigrants that fled the conflicts in Europe, and they run a bakery, and they encouraged David very much so to produce art. David was in charge of actually writing letters to the relatives in Spain, and he came back to Spain with his mother when he was very, very young, and that was the first time he went to El Prado, and that's how art really started opening up for him. He started very young in arts, and he was part of this Argentinian avant-garde that started to consume the global pop art movement, and he started painting. This is actually David's first exhibition at the Galeria Lirolai in Buenos Aires, where he made this beautiful portrait of Carlos Gardel. And there are several portraits that he produced in this time, in the style of pop art, with color blocks and simplified forms in large scale formats. He was then part of the avant-garde at the Instituto Torquato di Tella, which was this effervescent institution that hosted so many of David's colleagues: Marta Minujín, Rubén Santantonin, Liliana Porter, and many artists that we know and love here at Dia. This is La Menezunda, which is incredible environment that's made out of many rooms, many interactive rooms with neon lights, even a couple that's sleeping in a bed. It was recently restaged at the New Museum. It was a rare opportunity to see that work. And we'll go back also to Marta Minujín, because you have had a wonderful kind of landmark exhibition of all these practices from Latin America. El Superelástico, which is another work he produced in the context of Instituto di Tella in 65, and this was, very clearly kind of like a jump from the pop forms, these syncretic forms of color blocks that were suddenly coming alive in the space through different shapes in wood, and we have created some incredible works that are, as David says, not reproductions, but the originals, which I think brings very interesting conversations about what the nature of reproductions and original works are, with artists creating these works in different contexts. Piel Rosa, which is another work from 65, with a very incredible image of David in this box. Thinking about the body and the absence of the body there. And something that is very curious to me is that David, we created a historical reproduction of this work, which is titled A Study of Relationships Between a Prism and the Empire State Building from 65. But at the time, David had not come to New York yet. And along with Ella, we were kind of like thinking about the fact that he did not knew the Empire State, and he, this was kind of like an image, and we realized that it was 65, also the year that Andy Warhol put out the film of the Empire State, and all these resonances that were shared with the Argentinian avant-garde and what was happening at the Instituto de Tella. So I am going to move to a work situation of time from 67, which were 17 box TVs, which were tuned to a channel that had no signal. And because of that, the only thing you could see was static. Now, static is the visual form of zero information, but it actually has a lot of information. And it has sound too. So this work, which was installed for the first time at Torquato di Tella, Sabine, you install in your show. So maybe this is a good segue into speaking about your work with David, your exhibition via this particular work.
Sure. Thanks for having me first, and also congratulations to this beautiful exhibition. As we all realize, David is a social animal. He needs people. And I think it's really very sad he's not here with us. And as you see, I have a paper here, which I can throw away, of course, because Ella and Humberto prepared kind of a script, which we can use as a cumulative script. As David titled the film, actually, I acquired already for the Generali Foundation collection in the 2000s, among a number of other works. So we're trying to play with it around, because I didn't prepare a lecture or anything else. I'm more, if David is showing, he usually wants to have me over as a sort of sparring partner. And it happened several times, because working with David is a pleasure, but it's very complex, as all my colleagues here know very well. I'm looking at Anne in particular. It's very challenging and very complex, because in particular those works he used technology. And he usually uses the technology of that time. And that's no coincidence, because what Humberto briefly explained with the scene, in particular in Buenos Aires, was very much formed by this institute, Torquato di Tella, which was when I started to work with these with artists from the 60s from this region I had no idea about. And it was very funny, because I worked as a private museum called Generali Foundation, sponsored by insurance company, and suddenly there was this Instituto Torquato di Tella by a sort of Latin American General Electric, one would say. And it did not only offer amazing spaces and a genius curator, Romero Brest, we're all aware about how influential and how important he was, but also enormous possibilities. So David was invited to a project there, and I think it was for a special group exhibition called Experiencias Visuales. Sorry, my Spanish is not really existing, rather gastronomic. That he said, okay, here I am. I'm using what they can provide at best, which I wouldn't be able to use otherwise. So he asked them to provide 17 TV sets, the most modern in the most modern technology of that time. And actually, the curator, as far as I remember, gave kind of a brief for this exhibition to all the artists, that they should create something imaginary actually for the audience. So the audience becomes, or gets a kind of role of like a quasi-creator, that they will imagine something which the artist does not deliver visually. So David came up with the idea of this installation of TV sets, which he turned on to a non-existing channel. A non-existing channel at that time meant that you would have what was called at that time white snow. So it was, you had this kind of moving light image, and you had this kind of very strange sound. And that was it. But it was an amazing installation at that time, and it could only happen at this very place, in this very context. And I think that's very typical of David. So, and I was actually not the first one recreating this for the show Humberto was mentioning, with the title Vivencias, which actually we have stolen from the Tropicalismo movement from Oiticica. It was an exhibition you wouldn't be able to do today, I guess, and I got really crazy or mad doing this show. It was one of the most challenging exhibitions actually ever did. And we showed this piece by David actually next to a piece, Tropicalio by Helio Tisica, by the way, both from the same time, more or less. And what did we do, actually, and that would be an interesting conversation now with Humberto, because they're showing this piece very differently. We decided, in a way, to simulate what the white snow because actually today, or at that time in the 2000, if you would turn your TV set to a non-existing channel, and Jeff, you know this very well, I guess, looking at you, the screen would turn blue. It is very particular blue. And I think after a couple of seconds, it would turn black. So the TV set would be dead, more or less. So there would be no light, no sound, nothing. We didn't want that, and I think we kind of, our technician, and I talked to your technicians recently, how they were dealing with this. We created kind of a shortcut. That was a discussion with David we had to more or less simulate this situation, that the technology is the only light in the room and creates this kind of this void, if you want, this technological void. And that was it. And for me, it's always interesting to see this piece, and this is one of them, traveling actually, and how they change through the discussion. I think with David, it's very important who and how you're working with him. He likes to be challenged. He likes to have a conversation with the curator. And that's what we did. And it's actually a very important piece, not only if you look at this today, 67, it's incredible in terms of the use of technology and media and what he thought about it. It's also his last piece he made in Buenos Aires, actually, because right after that he went to Venice to take part in the 68 Biennale.
Now, to go back to the exhibition you curated, and just because I think with this idea of networks in mind, it is really important how we're tracing, along with Jordan, Matilde, who are curators here, and the research that we're doing to articulate these networks and pathways through art history. You included Elio Tisica and Marta Minujín in that show, so maybe you can we have a show by Elio Tisica at Dia Beacon, and Marta is a person that also has been incredibly interested in technology. She was playing with phones and with telegraph machines at the time that David was also investigating these ideas of television and transmission of information. So maybe you can say a bit about their inclusion of them in the show.
There have been many more. Actually, I didn't prepare that. We just pulled off some slides from my website if you want to know more about this show. We did research on artists from Latin America for a certain reason, because there was a connection to Austria, actually. First, concrete poetry, architecture, and then the use of media, actually. There were even active communications, actually. And interestingly enough, I mean, those who had the chance to experience Tropicalia, there's a TV set in one of those booths at the end, actually. And we did research, and it was just overwhelming, the sort of quality and innovation of the artists who have been working. I must really say, I'm still impressed. It's still amazing. I feel what have been accomplished and at what kind of level the artists were working. And I decided that then, how going to solve this? I don't have the resources and the space to do a sort of survey show like Latin, I don't know, there have been a number of them already before. And I decided to focus on sort of works we would call now as immersive works, where the audience plays a certain role, where people can interact. Not all the works were as large. We also showed by Sildo Meirelles the bottles and the banknotes, for instance, but most of the works were immersive. So Lea Lublin, Luis Kamnitzer, Anna Mendieta, and Marta Minujín mentioned. And it was a happening, actually, she did also, and we first recreated this mattress gallery, which was later shown at MoMA PS1, I think. But also, I mean, Marta is a real hero for David Lamelas. If he would be here, he would speak largely about her. And actually, all the artists have been to Vienna so far. They have been alive, not Anna Mendieta, of course, and not Greco. But Greco is another, and you really have to say, a hero for David Lamelas, because those are really the people he always mentions, how influential they were. Greco because his Dijonman approach, of course, and Marta because of this life, art and connecting to life. And even in Vienna, when we did this really crazy happening, these are just sections. Actually, Marta, we had to organize a horse. We had a lot to deal with animal protection things because Tropicalia also involves parrots. That was another thing. So we had to get this horse inside the museum. This is just across the Hotel Trieste, by the way, who sponsored this event and had a hard time with Marta. She came on this horse. She was riding into the gallery. Inside there was a cow. She wanted to offer milk of the cow to the people, and had always constantly try that this is not going to happen because I would be sued immediately if some bacteria. And then there were, and weeks before, you see these people in this mattress gallery. These are all stars of various media. Actually, on the right-hand side, you see the architect Hans Hollein, which is probably more aware now because of Max. Then there's a famous ski racer, Karl Schranz. Next to him is now a Nobel Award winner, Kurt Zeilinger, Elke Christofek, the artist, the daughter of Peter Handke, and many more. And they did a concert with their cell phones, actually. So that's Marta. It was just one element, and we did advertisements of people who would subscribe as fans and would interact. And David got so excited, he was running around, and I don't think Ella, we did images on it. He made vivo ditos around me while I had to play the moderator of this happening. Vivo dito is a piece originated by Greco, Alberto Greco, a very important person. He invented this already in 1962, actually. It's quite amazing, which means he would turn passerbys into artworks by simply drawing a circle with a chalk around them and signing it as Vivo Dito. So he was constantly running behind me and turning me into an artwork. So it was a really crazy night, I must say. But I'm telling you this not only because to show how David is interacting with the audience and with other artists, but how much he gets influenced by what's happening and how he's reacting. And I think his work is very much informed about that, which people often focus on this conceptual part. I think is a very clear idea, and sometimes people don't even expect that from him. If you experience him, he's a very alive person, so he has very clear ideas, but at the same time, this interaction with people, with friends, and you see it through all his works, is crucial for him. I mean, all his works, the next work is always an answer and a response to the previous one, I think, and how people are reacting, how people are experiencing it. I think that's extremely important to him.
Yeah, I was having a very interesting conversation with Donna De Salvo, who's also a curator here, who I think might be here. Yes, hi Donna. And she was saying something that it was quite striking, because she's saying David is, such an important figure of contemporary art, and she's, like structuralist, and he like ticks all the boxes of these decades and this movement. But he's also a poet. He's also thinking about things that might otherwise be taboo for other artists, right? He's talking about emotions, he's talking about feelings, he's talking about the experience of people in the room with this type of installations. And maybe that thought is a good segue to talk about the new version that we did of Situation of Time, this commission that we developed in reference to the Situation of Time of 1967, that was thinking about all this disorganized information and how in that time with this new technology, which were really these state-of-the-art TV sets, was delivering light and information in a raw state and sound. But in here, it's quite funny because we actually might have acquired the last batch of these TV boxes ever in the world. There is one person that does it in the United States, and we were struggling to fulfill the order of 17 TVs, and we barely made it there. So this is a dying technology, and this is like an extinct form of transmission of image because of the components. So, you know, in the transition of these decades, these technologies have changed so much. And David was thinking also about the bars, these bars that were used by the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers, that were commonly called the SMPTE bars, that were to calibrate monitors. So I think the commentary here is much more pointed to think about what do we think as a convention. How I think, for me personally, as my own interpretation, is more about the impossibility of achieving that sense of standardization, and what happens when we have, even if you look at each one of the TVs over there, each one has a different quality. The color is quite different, and you see different textures, different shapes. So I think in a really sharp commentary about the state of the world, I think David creates second iteration or a second manifestation of this work, which adapts here to our galleries. Just a thought about that work, and maybe just to think about David's trajectory also in life. This is 67, this is the Tela Institute. There's all this, again, energized, effervescent environment, and he soon gets a scholarship from the British Council to jump on a ship for 2 months and go to London to study in Central St. Martin's, which at the time was quite a reputable program. And
but to his disappointment, all the artists he wanted to meet, they were already gone, right?
Totally. And then he comes...
Social failure, so to say.
He also comes to the sculpture program with Anthony Caro, and he wants to do film. So he gets in this conundrum of having this discipline that's so medium-oriented, whereas his interests were pointing to somewhere else. He before won the prize at the Sao Paulo Biennale in '67 with this work, two modified spaces, and that's how he gets invited to represent Argentina in the Venice Biennale in '68, and that he.
May I just add, in La Menesunda, I think there was a closed circuit TV piece by Marta Minuchin already. So Di Tella was in particularly very innovative, helping artists to use technology, actually. And I think he was one of the collaborators for La Menesunda, right?
Yes, he was one of the collaborators.
Others. And I think this piece, or this experience with Marta, was really highly influential to him. And yeah.
Completely. And just to move to Office of Information, which is obviously one of the most important works in David's career and in this show, which is a work you acquired for MoMA almost 2 decades ago. So maybe you can start thinking about what the work is, what the work means, how was the process of integrating it to MoMA, and we can take it from there.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of his most important pieces, and I'm very happy it's so present now, because it was up to not so long ago reduced to a single image, what we see here. And a lot of people were probably thinking about it, like me. Already during Vivencias, I was discussing with David whether we should reconstruct this piece. And for various reasons, we decided for the other one. But it's a discussion ongoing since 2000 with me and David. And yeah, it was his invitation to the Venice Biennale, probably the shortest Biennale ever, because it was obviously '68 during the Vietnam War. It was boycotted and people were protesting. And David had to present this proposal actually beforehand to a committee, and surprisingly they have selected him. And it's an office, obviously, a communication office behind a glass wall, and it's office furniture from Olivetti, and it's fed by news information delivered through ANSA, the Italian news agency. It's coming in through a telex machine, and it has a what we would say now, performative component, what museums, these are these terms museums establish. So the incoming news would be, I don't know if you have an image, would be read out loud by someone and posted to the wall. That's the version my successor, Stuart Comer, showed. And would also be recorded, so people could listen at it later. And you can imagine what kind of information came in 68. And it would also be translated, I think, to 6 languages even. So it's quite an outstanding piece. And one could think about how an artist coming from Buenos Aires comes to Italy to present such an innovative piece. And in particularly presenting David now, I think, thinking about his use of mass media, communication media. Today, I think it's so important to show this, because he showed from the 60s onwards how information is conveyed, how it's manipulated, how organizations have an impact on it, what kind of information, how we receive information. So actually, this piece is, as David called it, or he told me, I said that, I don't recall it, it's a Trojan horse to MoMA, because I presented, and I'm really very thankful. I don't know if Estrelita Brodsky is here. She was instrumental in acquiring these 5 really important works by David Lamelas, all from the late 60s. I presented to the Latin American Committee, and we bought a number of other works, like by Marta also as well, through the same committee. And I asked them, so we could buy version A, B, or C. C is all of it we can get. And they really voted for C, and they were still collecting funds when I wasn't even at MoMA. I think this is really outstanding. And this piece came in as a gift from Jan Mott and David, and we had no idea, that's why we call it a Trojan horse, if we could even manage to present this piece, because all what we had was this historical photo. And we undertook a lot of research, and luckily had an intern from Italy at that time, Francesca Valentini, I still remember, and we were able to set up with the archive of the Biennale communication, because there was literally nothing, just this photo, no sound, nothing. And we found quite a bit in the archive in Venice, and luckily we were able to officially accept the donation, because that's how museum procedure goes. You can't just accept a gift which is nothing. So it has to go through a procedure, and we were really able to acquire. I'm very proud of this, and I'm very happy it's so present now, this piece, actually, because this is a little bit my curatorial history or agenda, to bring these important works back to life and in a way where you discuss this with the audience. I'm not so interested in just reconstructing or redoing pieces. Then an essay is maybe more important than. But in this case, I think it is really important to show it. And I'm kind of the sparring partner for David through all these years since the piece is existing. And yeah, I think it's interesting. You showed it without the glass box. In Bolzano, I had this discussion with David. They showed something. The Antonio Dalle Nogare Foundation showed it too, but they said this is not the piece. This is an assemblage of the, let's call it the ingredients of the piece. Here you show it as a loan, official loan from MoMA. But not in a glass box. And maybe we should show the other slide, actually, of the location, because the interesting thing was also, that's a map of the Giardini, for those who are not so familiar with. We didn't even know where it was shown. That was the beginning, actually. Where was the pavilion of Argentina? We had no idea. And through research, we found out in the very center, I don't know if someone can point to it, there's this, what you're all familiar with if you go to Venice, the pavilion of Finland, designed by Alvar Aalto, actually as a nomadic pavilion, but it never traveled because it's a pavilion which can be dismantled. And from the photographs, I don't have them here because that was not the plan to go very deep into that subject right now. From the photographs of the installation, historical ones by Hugo Mulas, who was a great photographer and took all these photographs from the Biennale in '68, that it must be in this pavilion. David didn't remember, actually. So the Finnish pavilion was done by Alvar Aalto, but used by Argentina at that time. And he wasn't even alone there. There were two other artists, actually. And David said they kind of put him in the back because they were not so convinced about this piece. And when the Biennale closed, because of all the protests, everything went apart. And we had a hard time. We figured out a relative of Lucio Fontana was even the translator of all the news. So a lot of things came together. It was quite fascinating, this travel through this history of the piece and the making. And then David realized when he was invited to Venice, the first thing is he went to Olivetti, because Olivetti was not even an innovative firm. And we think of Carlos Capo, of course, but they had always, he wanted to have the furniture of a news agency. And Olivetti, you know, Italian design from the 60s, was very known for using or providing to their staff also the most modern furniture of that time. So he got that. So it was one piece after the other came into place. And that was very beautiful, actually.
And as far as I understand, MoMA undertook this incredible research where you discover all these conditions. And something that I want to add too is that the Biennale actually censored the title of the work, and
yes.
they changed the title to avoid the Vietnam War portion of it.
It was not the Biennale, I think it was Argentina, actually. I'm not sure if the Biennale censored it, actually. I think it was his home country.
So this research and this kind of like historical recovery of the work included remaking all the furniture, because of course Olivetti was not doing furniture in 2010, and you guys redid all the furniture.
No, it was a refound. David kept sending me things through eBay, by the way, and the bills from Telex, and nothing looked like that. He just was so excited at that time. And at the end, things came together, actually. Yeah, but it's not remade, as far as I'm concerned.
To go back to your question, because in here it also takes a very different shape.
Yeah.
And if you see this was kind of like a window. It was supposed to be a room, but of course here at Dia Chelsea we have our beautiful window in the gallery, which makes that negotiation between the interior and the exterior. So therefore we didn't need to build another room. The gallery itself becomes that space for negotiation. And that's why in conversation with MoMA, and also taking in consideration all the intense dialogue that's happening around the work with, for instance, the performance of Time that happened during COVID through Zoom. And, you know, if Telex, for instance, is such a machine of its time, what can we say about Zoom, right? We all remember being during COVID trapped in a gazillion Zoom meetings, and that is a communication medium that's so linked to a feeling and to an environment that is so familiar to us. So those type of resonances that are contingencies that arise in the space was so important to not isolate the work. And also because MoMA, for instance, has a different mission, which has to do with the recovery and the presentation of history in ways that Dia perhaps are not responsible to do that, or have we have a different mission and a different way of understanding how we're articulating this history. So because of that, and because we're in conversation with the artists, we ultimately decided that we needed to have the work in an environment which could have that open dialogue with other works.
Yeah, it's interesting because it does something with the piece, because by putting it in the box, it turns the office, so the effect of mass communication and how information is conveyed, into an art object, of course. And once you take the box, the case away, it becomes a daily object or a daily infrastructure, you could say. But we had this discussion also in Bolzano, where they showed it in a gallery in the back without any glass. And I said, why don't you take advantage of one of those empty stores in the city? I do feel the glass is important. I think it was a very important element because he had it in the pavilion too, for various reasons actually. Because otherwise, I mean, the performative component, if someone would read the news loud, you wouldn't need the headphones and all those things. Yeah, but David is playing around with his works, and I think that's what I said. He likes to interact with curators. You have a conversation with him about it, and there are always several ways how to approach it, and yeah.
Yeah, and also, I mean, just to add that as part of this acquisition you made for MoMA, you acquire analysis of the elements by which the massive consumption of information takes place from '68. And this is a work that just came up on View today, I think, as a resonance of what's happening here. So maybe you want to talk a little bit about this work?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very happy again that it's not so often if you acquire works from MoMA and you're gone that they are shown. So I'm very thankful to Stuart. They put it up, and Erika Papanek, as I heard, my former assistant. Yeah, I think it was extremely exciting that we're able to get all these pieces. So this piece came together right after Venice for the show Prospect, where he was invited by Annie de Decker. And it's, you could say, it's kind of a condensed version of The Office in some way or the other, where he digested the work in Venice for here, and it's a direct response also to the institution where he was shown. So basically, he split a newsreel in all these three elements, again, audio, sound, visual, similar to The Office, so there are a lot of parallels. This is a random film that is projected, and in the second display case, he makes direct references to the location and to the exhibition, actually. He presents news and all other things, and this was really the original components we got still. So it was really exciting, and I'm really looking forward to see it. I haven't seen it up at MoMA yet, so I think it's amazing. So I thought, since, I mean, you have to keep in mind I was in charge of media and performance-based work at MoMA, and I never considered myself just working in this in this field, so to say. So and when I came, there were great single-channel videos and some later very popular performance pieces. And what I tried in this little bit less than 3 years to create a collection covering the history of it, covering the history in also a very a large geography, thinking about the Americas, of course, and Europe. So I acquired, my main job was there actually to acquire a lot of works from the 60s, 68. David is a little bit an exception, but I mostly acquired work by women artists, I should say here. David knows that. He's always a little bit an exception in my curator life. But I think that's a very important piece. And we also collected the films from that time, study of the relationship of inner and outer space and things like that, yeah.
All the works that we have spoken about today are from the 60s and are encompassed in this beautiful publication, which was happened in '78, and it already celebrated 15 years of David's production. So it's quite an extraordinary career. I was reading the recent catalog that David published in his exhibition in Galicia that happened a couple of years ago, and our colleague Pedro de Llano was a curator there, said something that really resonated with me, and that's maybe the last thought I'm going to share with you before we open for any comments, questions. And he said that there were very few artists that could articulate with their own production the whole history of contemporary art, right? Like the latter portion of the 20th century, and David is one of those. You can almost address any kind of movement, city, period, media through David's work, and that is quite special. And yeah, we hope this show, which is going to be on view for an entire year in the very style of Dia Art Foundation, where you can come back and see the work in the snow in the spring, in the summer, with different light, where light itself is such a huge element in the space and with the works.
And in his work.
And in his work. And obviously here with the film and performance program. So yeah, thank you so much to everyone for enduring with curators with no artist. And yeah, we're super happy to address any comments, questions you may have. And yeah, Jordan?
In the process of recuperating and restaging Office of Information for the first time, in your conversations with David, did you all ever consider updating the news and information to the current moment, or sort of rethinking it as a site-responsive or like context-specific installation that would sort of shift in relation to its iteration?
Thank you for this question. That gives me the opportunity to state that the first installation at the Modern was not done by myself, it was done by Stuart Comer. So actually I never showed the piece, in fact. I acquired it, so it's my baby, and handed it over to someone else. But usually the Modern does conduct very deep conversations and records it with the artist. I don't remember, I still did this with David actually. How to show this piece, also in terms of new technology. So we usually did this when you acquire, like I acquired a lot of slideshows, for instance, analog slideshows still, whether this technology would die, if artists would agree. But also in terms of content like that, if you would adjust it to new content. Yeah, but this was up to Stuart, actually. Yeah. So unfortunately he's not here. I think I'm basically replacing him, one could say, because he's in Madrid. Yeah, and it would be great to have to sit down with Stuart at some point to have this conversation.
And I can comment a little bit on that, Jordan, because MoMA actually produced an incredible manual of how to install this work. And there were a lot of conversations also of how to turn the different translations into a script, which is the script we have here that our performer reads when she comes, which, by the way, is the same performer that read the script at MoMA in 2015. So I think the news are linked to a time, and because the title of the work is Office of Information of Vietnam War, I think it'd be hard to update the news, because then it would be a different subject. And because the news also were live news that they were receiving in the telex by the ANSA agency, they're linked to what was happening right there and at that time, if that makes sense.
In a way, if I may add, this piece is still growing, because in Bolzano, since in Italy, they found more components, which they handed over to the Modern, and also original telex paper, actually, so they could use it, because this is not produced anymore, this thermo paper and things like that. So I think this piece is still coming together.
Yeah, it's alive.
Yeah. And I had discussions with David whether, and I think he did a piece on the Iran war at some time, didn't he, somewhere? So he sometimes likes to produce a complete new version from the same approach, but with new technology and new references, of course. So, I mean, thinking what's going on today, I don't know. Yeah, David obviously didn't want to go into that. And when you worked on the show, there was not the Iran war, the current one going on, right? So, yeah.
I was thinking about, I mean, Jordan probably knows this as well, but there is a Fluxus piece from Nettunis 1962 called In Memoriam to Adriano Olivetti. Mm-hmm. They used adding paper as the score to, like, for all the actions. So one precedent I was thinking about, and also about this information work. So obviously, was this in the information show?
This not, no. There was another. The film. David had a film in information show.
You mean if Office of Information was in MoMA's information show?
No.
No, it was.
Venice.
It was actually Time as Activity, which the first film he did in '69. He was invited to participate to information with that work, but he didn't have a physical work in the show.
No, because there's a lot of things that are circling around all this, like obviously On Guar is a million years, and the Art by Telephone show in Chicago.
That was 71, I guess.
No.
Was 69, okay.
In 67, and actually, I think Virginia Duhan kind of pulled a lot of it because they didn't have the money to show a lot of the things, but Harker was in that show, and then of course he did his plexi voting piece, but George Brecht did a piece about landmass translocations, which he had conceived in London, and Walter de Maria had visited him, and he was doing a two continents piece. So they were both thinking of distances, and and Brecht's thing was to ask people if you would like better weather and move Florida closer to London or something like these kind of things. But the way he described it in Art by Telephone on the phone to the Jan van der Mark was to say it was a public opinion poll. So it's sort of interesting how they were all trying to kind of crowdsource or something. I mean, this is obviously in the Vietnam War that they got the information through the telex, like so-and-so's invaded, whatever. So it's a beautiful echo of that.
Yeah, and there's also a poll that's made to people in the streets on London in the study of the relationships between inner and outer space that is here also in view. And I was just thinking, about how cross-pollinated the practice is, and how, that made me think about a publication, which is something that we didn't get to speak about, from 1970, but this is sort of like an instruction-based work in which David shares these prompts about language and art to different colleagues. And he had a very strong relationship with Stanley Brown that also John works with, and he was friendly with Sol LeWitt. He was hanging out with many of this generation, and there is so many resonances. But not only that, if you think, for instance, about post-minimalism, and the clocks that we're showing here were done 10 years after Felix González Torres did.
But I mean, she brings up this issue of influence, right? And our friend Benjamin probably wrote the most important text on David, and he states that obviously the notion or the category of influence with David it's obsolete, clearly, because the office, I mean, he's not here. I mean, I would have asked him again, what did you know, what did you learn about art in Buenos Aires? He went to libraries, basically, but he was not in Europe before, right, unless as a kid, so he could not really know. So the office was really developed from this background of detailer, actually, I think.
In Paris when Ligia Clark was there?
No, that was not. And I think Ligia Clark, he did not know at that time. So Marta Minuchin went to Paris in the early 60s, actually. So that was, but this was really, it came really out of a different context, not this kind of questioning and taking advantage in a sort of curious or explorative way of new mass technology. I think that's a really stunning thing with David and the office. I think, yeah.
That's why I agree with you about the glass. It's not an office.
Yeah, I would say so, yeah.
You said something about poetry and it being a kind of odd outlier or something. I actually think through the 60s, the word poetry, like in this kind of cusp of pop and conceptual, the word poetry started to be used for anyone who used language, because they didn't have the term conceptual. They had concept art, but not conceptual art. And so, like, people who weren't poets at all were called poets and published in poetry magazines because they didn't have a hook for it, sort of thing.
Well, there was something like concrete poetry, and these were artists like Gerhard Römer, also,
and I guess I also
in Latin America,
the
British.
word emotional, which is something that, for instance, David brings when he speaks about Falling Wall, which is the work that made him come back to sculpture in the 90s. And he's thinking about scaffolding, but he's also thinking about emotional scaffolding. And, it takes you to different direction. But yeah, I think before this turns into a complete symposium from the 60s, we'll thank everyone, and please make sure that you take one of these books with you. And thank you.